Hello and welcome, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a moment. We've got some folks who are early. So while we're waiting for everyone else to join, if you want to say hi in the chat, let us know your name, your role, and where you're dialing in from. I suspect we're going to have folks from across the country here, so it'll be fun to see where everyone's from. Hello, hello. All right, an IE team, I think we can go ahead and mute you all. From Indonesia. Wow, welcome. All right. From Neptune, New Jersey. I'm seeing that in a private message here. Welcome. Welcome, Doug. We have Tim joining us. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. So while we wait for everyone to join, we'll give it just another minute or two here as people jump from meeting to meeting. But let us know in the chat your name, perhaps your role, and where you're dialing in from. We've got Indonesia and Neptune, New Jersey represented already. Where else do we have folks joining from? Let us know in the chat. All right, Chicago. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. As you join today, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let us know in the chat. Say hi to everyone here. Let us know your role, perhaps your name, and where you're joining from. San Francisco, Corey, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for having breakfast with us this morning. We've got folks having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with us, it seems, on this call. Great to see you. We'll give it just another minute as folks join. People are jumping from meeting to meeting. St. Louis, excellent, excellent. So almost every US time zone represented so far. Great to have you all with us today. All right. So it is two past the hour. I like to reward those who are prompt. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you've missed my introductory ask here, if you've just joined us, put your name, your location into the chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from today. We've got a great diverse group here in terms of location. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So, you are here today, hopefully, for the live event hosted by Insight Experience to talk about what is a leadership simulation. So, I will be your host today. My name is Krista Campbell, and I am a director and product leader at Insight Experience. So, that means that I work on the design and delivery of our leadership development offerings predominantly for more senior audiences, is what I focus on these days. And I currently sit in Boston, Massachusetts. So that's where I am talking to you all from today. So it's noon here. So welcome from wherever you are in the world. And I am joined by my colleague Andrea Marguerite, who is an associate consultant here at Insight Experience. Andrea works also on supporting the design and delivery of our offerings. And Andrea is running the Boston Marathon on Monday. So we can wish her some good luck in the chat as she embarks on her first marathon. Congratulations to Andrea. So it looks like we've got a forum here, and we are going to get started with what is a leadership simulation. So to begin, I want to just talk for a few minutes about Insight Experience and who we are. So Insight Experience was founded in 2001, so we are delighted this year to be celebrating our 25th anniversary. And we focus on experiential leadership development learning that enables participants and leaders to see the connection between their everyday leadership and the business outcomes they drive. Part of our core expertise is the facilitation capabilities that we bring to our clients. So all of our facilitators come from top MBA programs across the country, across the world, and or have been in the trenches of leadership at Fortune 500 companies and can really speak the language of business with the leaders that we work with. And at Insight Experience, we deliver these kinds of immersive experiential training wherever you are. We meet your leaders where they are in their journey, whether that be in person for one day, in person for 3 days, virtually for a couple of days, virtually for an hour or two at a time. So we work with the clients and the leaders that we work with to design experiences that really meet them where they are. In our 25 years in business, we've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with a wide range of companies across industries and across the world. And in that
Kelly is
process,
leading a workshop.
whoops, look at that. You've got a sneak preview of what's ahead. In that process of working with these clients, we have been recognized from across the industry, from the Brandon Hall Group and others. And most recently, we've been awarded by the Brandon Hall Group with a Technology Excellence Award for our new AI grading capability. So we can grade the communications that our participants write using AI tools to give them tailored feedback based on the text that they've entered. So that's just a little bit about us in case you're not familiar with Insight Experience, but I see lots of friendly faces and names on this call already. So let's jump into what is a leadership simulation. And here at Insight Experience, because we are an experiential learning company, I am going to have you do rather than tell you what we do. So we're going to actually do a scenario together today. And to do that, I am going to invite you to meet Kelly. So Kelly, here's just a bit about Kelly. She graduated from Penn State in 2020. Oh gosh, she probably didn't have the graduation ceremony that she had hoped for that year. But nevertheless, she has persisted and she has recently been promoted to senior analyst. And you can see here we've got some information about Kelly and her current capabilities. So one thing about simulation-based learning is that sometimes we have metrics or quantitative measures for things that we don't normally have a quantitative measure for in real life. And we do that very intentionally. We do that so you could gauge improvement or decline on a given indice and also to benchmark against your peers. So here you can see in this example that Kelly, I would say she's pretty motivated. She's got an 86 for her motivation. And then her people skills and her business skills, I would say that's roughly average, right? 65 and 70. And we also have some qualitative information about Kelly. So we know she's eager and she's capable, but she's still got room to grow and improve, right? So she's recently promoted. We know that she's got that motivation to do better and to keep growing her skills. So what I'm going to do next is I am going to actually show you a scenario that Kelly has brought forward to you. So you all are stepping into the shoes of Kelly's manager. So you'll want to listen carefully to the next slide because I am going to actually have you make a decision about what to do with Kelly in this situation. So again, you are now Kelly's manager, and here is the situation at hand.
Kelly is leading a workstream for an important time-sensitive deliverable going to senior leadership. Her role is to synthesize input and recommend a clear path forward. She comes to you and says,
I'm stuck on the recommendation. I've met with two senior stakeholders and they're pushing in completely different directions. One wants a fast, low-risk option we can roll out quickly. The other is pushing for a more ambitious approach that would require more coordination across teams. I can't realistically recommend both, and whichever way we go, one of them is going to feel like we didn't listen.
Decide your next steps with Kelly.
All right. So I'll give you just another moment here to give that a read, digest the situation. It's a time-sensitive ask. You've got stakeholders with a competing point of view, and you need to decide how to support Kelly. And to do that, I'm going to give you 5 options that you can pick from. You can only pick one. And you might feel constricted or restrained by the fact that you only have 5 and I'm making you pick one. But work with me here and pick the one perhaps that's closest to what you would want to do in real life. So you've got options A, B, C, D, and E. And what I'll ask you to do is Andrea is going to launch a Zoom poll, so that will pop up on your screen, and pick what would you do? You're Kelly's manager. How would you support her in this situation? So I'll give you all a moment to log your answers. How do you support Kelly? Okay. I'll give you just another moment there to log your answer. Decide the direction and tell Kelly what to recommend, all the way through coaching Kelly and re-engaging stakeholders. What would you do? I can see I've got 9 responses, so I'll give you all just another moment. What to do with Kelly, a 2020 grad, recently promoted, in a bit of a pickle with her senior stakeholders. So even if you haven't yet recorded your response, we'll keep that poll open for just a moment. But now I'm going to ask you in the chat, before I show you what you decided and what happened as a result of your decision, in the chat, tell me why. Why did you choose what you chose? If you decided to tell Kelly what to do and decide the direction yourself, why did you do that? If you decided to work with Kelly, why? What was your rationale? Let us know in the chat so we can learn from each other here. Why did you do what you did? I can see we've got some folks typing. Lots of support for Andrea's marathon. All right, Kara, thank you. Yeah, empowering Kelly, helping her work through others. Yeah, building autonomy, helping her gain confidence. What's going to happen the next time Kelly finds herself in this situation? Thanks, Kara. Andrew says, I don't want to tell her how to do her job. And I don't want to do it myself. Yeah, right. So again, it's sort of in that same vein of empowerment. Coaching Kelly is a longer term solution. Absolutely. Option E. Okay, so we're doing a lot of coaching and development here in what you're telling me in this chat, right? Supporting her along the way, helping her to build those skills. Absolutely. Let's see. Yeah, and also I'm seeing a private chat here about the face-to-face contact. How can we actually coach and spend time with this new leader? Asking her questions. Thank you. Right? Leading through inquiry to help her build and empower her. I like that language. So we're doing lots of coaching in here. Now, you all, this was a time-sensitive ask. Is there a trade-off or is there a risk that you've all accepted here in making that decision to coach Kelly? What's the risk? Let me know in the chat. Is there a risk? All right. Let's see. Here we go. I have things to do and she does too. Ah, yes. Andrew's saying it's gonna take time, right? That's the investment. That's the tension that we're managing as leaders. It's much faster to make that decision yourself and just tell Kelly what to do. And as you all pointed out, that long-term empowerment, what might that mean for the future, for both her future and for your future? Yes, there's always a risk, right? It's that short-term, long-term tension. Thank you. And saying I'm willing to take the risk to create the environment where the process of decision making is grounded rather than rushed. Wow. Thank you, Corey, for sharing that. What great observations and reflections. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results out with you all so you can see what you did. As I'm sure many of you have hypothesized from this conversation we have going in chat, all of you were choosing options C, D, or E to really engage Kelly in the process. None of you decided to sort of take that monkey yourself and make the calls and do that alignment work yourself. So, what I'm going to do now is show you, as a result of the decisions that you made, and as a result of all of those possible decisions, what happened to that project and what happened to Kelly. So, let's take a look first at time to deliverable to your senior leaders. So, how many days did each of these options take? So, we already have started to talk about this trade-off perhaps between creating that culture of empowerment versus speed. And so, of course, making the decision yourself fast, right? You can get that done in a day. But taking the time, option E, coaching Kelly to re-engage, then actually having her go back to those leaders, taking more time to get that deliverable finished, get that back to your senior leadership. So that's what happened in terms of time with your business deliverable. But now let's take a look what would have happened to Kelly as a result of these different options. So you all spoke to this very eloquently, I might say, in the chat about choosing either of these options to do this yourself, to take this opportunity, this project off of Kelly's plate, really perhaps missing an opportunity to build her people skills, missing an opportunity to build her business skills. And look at that. I'm showing you your starting position across all of these three metrics with this black bar where you started at the beginning. And look what these two options did in terms of her motivation. You took that project away from her, and she's lost pretty significant motivation as a result. She's been working on this, she's been engaging with those stakeholders. And so taking that away would impact her motivation. The options that you all chose here really helped and supported in building her skills in different ways, working together, doing that coaching, asking questions, all helping Kelly to think through this process, to practice the skills that she needs, and to keep her involved in this discovery and in this deliverable. So, improving all of those skill areas. So, again, managing that short term, long term, that speed versus time it takes to coach and build your next generation of leaders. So there you go. You can see the impact of your one decision here on both the business deliverable and on your development of Kelly. Here at Insight Experience, we call this dynamic the business cycle of leadership, which says that how you lead, how you show up as a leader with your communications, how you spend your time, and your priorities and focus ultimately impacts the effectiveness of the operating decisions implemented by your team. So, how equipped and capable are your employees to actually execute on the priorities and the strategic vision of the company to ultimately drive business outcomes? And so that's the dynamic that we've already started to talk about with Kelly, building that capability so that she can support and drive business results now and in the future. So, with that, I want to just pause again and I'm going to ask you in the chat, what reflection did your results prompt for you? It doesn't have to even be your results, but any of the results that I shared. Were you surprised? Did it make sense? Is it, what do you find yourself thinking as a result of having talked about this Kelly scenario? Let me know in the chat. And yes, Andrea, thank you for the reminder. As we go through this conversation, feel free to use the Q&A. You might have to hit the three buttons at the bottom to click more and get that Q&A visible, but that's always an option. So what, if any, reflection does this prompt for you as a leader? All right, I'm getting a private chat. I'm seeing the power of investing in your people, right? What does that mean for her in the long term? And how are we building that capability? Thank you. What else? Anything else that this prompts for you? Yeah, develop motivation and skills. In the end, it's an important trade-off to consider for the future. And Kara, what's cool about that is if something similar happens next time and you do some similar coaching, that time might go from 6 days down to perhaps 3 days because she's going to have that much more experience and skill from that work with you already. Yes. Yeah, Andrew, that's always the tension that we're managing, keeping your stakeholders happy in the short term, but building the capability of your team. It's always going to be a judgment call, right? I kept this scenario pretty intentionally vague so that you had to use your judgment to make a decision about what to do here. And in your context, depending on the deliverable, depending on the leaders, you might make a different situation with more details. Absolutely. Yeah, aligned with the result. Yeah, to develop our direct report. Ah, yeah, part of the decision equation for that manager. Absolutely. And being open as it communicates and supports Kelly. Absolutely, right? What great reflections as we think about building the capability of this young leader. And so, with that, we're going to pause because you all just did a, albeit mini, leadership simulation. That arc of scenario to decision making to reflection on your results, that is the magic and the art of a leadership simulation. So let's formally define what we mean by a leadership simulation at Insight Experience. And so leadership simulations balance the analytical and the interpersonal. I'm sure many of you have done business simulations where perhaps you were managing widgets or you were building some kind of product. I know in my undergraduate schooling days, we did a business simulation where we had to manufacture and sell laptop computers. And my team went all in on building the best factory we could. We had so much manufacturing capacity, but unfortunately, we had so much overhead, we ran that business into the ground, right? So it was really a business acumen focused experience. So at Insight Experience, we broaden that definition and we balance the analytical decisions that you make with the decisions about coaching your leaders, interacting with those leaders, about spending your time intentionally and communicating to your team. The New York Times had a great feature this morning that talked about the skills, the human skills that AI can't yet replicate, like influence, like presence in a meeting to move someone along in a conversation. And leadership simulations are great practice fields to help cultivate those kinds of skills. With that definition of a leadership simulation in place, I want us to zoom all the way out and think about how do you learn as a leader? How do you actually learn to lead? What does that process look like? How do we learn these skills of leadership? And there's a couple of different ways that we learn these skills, of course. I'm sure you're reflecting and thinking about some of these for yourself. But we learn these through observation, through watching others, deciding what strategies we like, what we don't like. We learn through experimentation, just trying something, right? What lands with the group, what doesn't. Of course, we learn through formal training. I'm sure everyone has done, participated. Perhaps you all have delivered and facilitated different formal training sessions at your place of work or in a formal job or in a community environment. Of course, we can learn through research. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of great books out there to help us learn to be better leaders and to reframe our thinking. Perhaps one of the best ways we learn to develop our leadership skills is through failure, through trying something that just didn't work and learning from that process. And finally, of course, coaching and mentoring, finding someone to help us really intentionally cultivate that skill. And what's interesting is all of this cannot be accomplished without the power of reflection. Because really, as leaders, we learn by doing all six of those things, but then we reflect on what that means for us. What does that mean for me? What did I actually learn from that training, from that coaching feedback from my mentor, from that book I read? And simulation-based learning, leadership simulations in particular, accelerate the time for us to be able to do that reflection. In a given leadership simulation experience, you might be making 3/4 worth of decisions in a matter of 2 days. And so you'll go through that whole process of working with others, seeing the impact of your decision, and reflecting on what that means for you and your business in a much more accelerated way than we ever could in real life. And so let's name a few more of the benefits of leadership simulation based learning experiences. I've already spoken to compressing the time to seeing your results, but at Insight Experience, we believe in the power of group based learning. So, all of our experiences, you're working with a team of peers to ultimately come to a set of decisions. So you're creating a shared experience where there's debate and discussion. So leaders are expanding their network. They're applying the content that they're learning in the program. It's being reinforced in an interesting, real life, realistic, and relevant way. And as I always like to remind groups when we do these leadership simulations, is that you could make the worst possible decisions in a leadership simulation, and your business would not lose any real money. So it's a safe, risk-free environment to ultimately try new things, experiment, and get feedback on what works and what doesn't work. So now we've started to define what a leadership simulation is. We've already called out that there's lots of different definitions of a simulation. I want to now show you, what does this leadership simulation experience look like at Insight Experience? And so here, this is what the experience looks like from the learner's perspective. First, we start with an introduction. So our participants will either read a case study, watch an introductory video. They'll get oriented to the business that they are running. And then very quickly, we move leaders into decision making. And so, as I mentioned, this is a group-based decision-making process. So we work to make the groups from diverse, from a functional perspective, perhaps from a tenure perspective, as different as we can make these groups. So that way there's rich debate and discussion about what is the right course of action. What should we do with Kelly? There's story sharing about, well, here's what happens in my experience, or I don't know about that. I've tried that before, and here's what happened. So we very quickly get leaders into actual decision making. From there, once leaders have submitted their decisions, we read them in as facilitators, and that allows us to have a discussion from the front of the room where we can take all of the different decisions and have a comparative conversation. So, given all of the same information teams tend to make different choices, right? And so we get to have a conversation about how different strategies lead to different business outcomes. So just like in our Kelly example, where I showed you what would happen if across all five of those options, we can learn from other teams in this experience about what would happen for those options that we didn't choose. And all of this is in service of those insights and that application and that important reflection process of what does this mean for me as a leader? What can I be doing differently, more of, back on the job as a result of this experience? And so you may be asking, okay, but what does this actually look like? And so this is a sample home screen from our leadership simulation software. And so teams will log into this, it runs online, and you can see here the variety of decisions that we have teams make. Things that are more, I'll call interpersonal, like setting priorities, communicating, having interactions with your team, and things that are more analytically focused, like executing strategic projects for the business and actually hiring and allocating resources across teams. So again, you can see that balance between the analytical and the interpersonal. And we sometimes joke in the simulation space that we risk leaders walking away from our sessions thinking that good leadership means clicking a decision on the screen. And so what we do is we bring the simulation to life at very intentional points in an experience to actually have leaders practice having critical conversations with their direct reports or with senior leaders or with their peers. And so I'll ask you all to just reflect on this question, right? When was the last time you in your role had to have an important conversation with someone and you grabbed a colleague and you said, "Hey, I need to have an important conversation with so and so, with a direct report. Can you just come and join me for that conversation and just, sit there and watch and then give me feedback about how I showed up in that conversation?" Right? We almost never do that. The leaders that I work with have told me that very few of them have ever done that. And so simulations allow us to create that safe space to get input from your peers about those critical conversations in the course of managing all of these different priorities and decisions that you have to make in the business. Now, let's go into a couple of specific examples because we've talked about the kinds of decisions, but what are some of the learning goals that we can help companies and that we've recently helped companies reinforce? So, one recent example of a leadership simulation, specific behavior that we wanted to reinforce, our client wanted to be able to measure and play back to our leaders how well they were able to see, collaborate, act, learn, and elevate, how well they could scale themselves is the acronym. And so what we were able to do is actually model which decisions in the simulation experience mapped to those five behaviors. How did, across 3 rounds of simulation decision making, did their decisions actually demonstrate those five capabilities? And so you can see here in this sample data set, this team leaned in very heavily on their learn indice and perhaps leaned in less on the see and act indice. So that was a feedback loop that these participants got at the end of each round of decision making about how their leadership behaviors showed up in the decisions that they made. Leadership is not separate from decision making, right? It happens in the course of decision making, in the course of making your business choices. Another example, and this one is perhaps a favorite of mine, but leadership simulations allow us to reinforce the value of thoughtful time allocation. So what I'm showing you on the screen now is what teams inherit in one of our simulation experiences in terms of how their predecessor spent their time. And, I like to joke, looking at this, they're your predecessor for a reason. This person was spending 50% of their time managing urgent issues. Holy smokes, that's a lot of time managing urgent issues. So again, in the course of the simulation decision making, teams have the opportunity to decide how they want to spend their time. And it is modeled, so it's not always exactly what you intend because, emergencies do happen. You do have these urgent issues that come up. But what we can show our leaders at the end of this experience, at the end of 3 rounds, perhaps, of decision making, is how their actual time evolved. So you can see here now, teams have a very different profile of how they actually spent their time. What I like to call out when I talk about slides like this is the relationship between the green, the time spent coaching direct reports and working with your employees, in yellow, the relationship between time spent coaching and time spent managing urgent issues. You can see here in this particular data set, Team 3 investing heavily in the team development categories here and getting almost 12 hours of their week, assuming a 40-hour week, back from their time. Their team was better equipped to handle those urgent issues, so they never even hit your desk. So we can reinforce those kinds of important leadership behaviors through this modeling. And one final example for you is helping leaders to teach, not tell. So somewhat similar to the first example that I shared, which one of our clients really wanted to be able to highlight for the leaders during the course of this experience, how many of the decisions that you made were teaching decisions, right? Those decisions that you all made about Kelly, empowering decisions, helping to build the next generation of leaders versus telling. And so you can see here in this 8-team data set, teams did a pretty good job across these 2 rounds of decision making. You can imagine us sitting in a room of 40 leaders and us showing this slide. And team 6 is hooting and hollering. They're so proud of how many teach, not tell decisions that they've made. And then we can show them, but there was 41 possible opportunities. So we leave them with you did great. There's so much improvement. And as leaders, can we be doing even more of this teach, not tell behaviors in the course of this simulation? So those were just 3 examples for you about how we can really help leaders make the connection between their decisions and the business results they drive. And so here's a couple of other things, topics, areas that participants can learn from leadership simulations. So we talked a bit about strategic communication and coaching. Business acumen, of course, is a big one with a back-end model, but influence, setting direction, all of those important interpersonal skills as well can be taught in these kinds of leadership simulations. So now, what makes Insight Experience different from other leadership simulation providers? And what I will say to that is we use a 3-part methodology that we call ART to build and develop all of our leadership simulation experiences. So that ART stands for Artful Design, Robust Facilitation, and Targeted Connections. So all of our simulations are really rooted in your business. They are custom modeled with the financials and the context that are going to be relevant and realistic for your company, for your leaders, not adapted from a generic template. As I said earlier, our bench of facilitators are seasoned business leaders from top business schools as well. So they speak that language. They know how to help you unpack a P&L and really help you make those connections about what happened in your business. And finally, targeted connections. At Insight Experience, we believe in the power of the model to really make it clear and realistic for our leaders. So we can model the strategic, financial, and people dynamics at play in any given business context. So leaders can explicitly see how those choices led to their outcomes. We can model the impact of not making a decision. We can model one metric's impact on another. So our robust modeling capability that we've refined over the last 25 years really helps us to set us apart from others in the industry. And so you might be thinking, Okay, great. But what does this mean for my business? How can we measure this? How can I share this back to my senior stakeholders? And of course, we can do this in a couple of different ways. Of course, we can measure participant reactions largely through NPS scores. And I'm sharing some recent examples with you in manufacturing, retail, and digital media. This is just from the last couple of weeks. We can measure learning lift through pre and post assessments. And so, a medical device company that we've worked with throughout the experience with us, we saw their leaders drew a 47% increase in improvement in their strategic communication across those 3 days in the program. And finally, behavior and results. So, one of the healthcare companies that we work with saw their retention rates rise above industry average. Watch that happen as a result of their alumni in the program sticking around in this particular company. Beyond just measuring impact, we also do what we call insights and analytics work. And so, as a program sponsor, we could do an analysis for you of based on the decisions that your leaders made. What does that mean for future learning, for gaps in their current skills? So, you can see here the kinds of analytics that we can play back to you as a result of your leaders going through these experiences. This is one of my favorite examples, the Your Insights, which environments did you scan? This was from a program, we had 25 teams, and look at this. Across 25 teams, very few teams scanned their macro environment. Most of these teams stayed focused internally on their organization and their direct environment, but less focus on the strategic, broader environment in which they're operating in. And we were able to play that back to that client organization to really help reinforce the power of strategic thinking and the importance of continuing to develop those skills in their leaders over time. So, with that, I want to thank you all. You were incredibly engaged in our exercise with Kelly. Thank you, thank you. We're going to move into Q&A now in just a moment, but in case you need to drop, I just want to give you some information about how to get in touch with us. So, if you have any specific questions about your business, shoot us an email at info@insight-experience.com. Check us out online and follow us on LinkedIn. We also have a blog that we publish to every other week. So you can subscribe to our blog for consistent thought leadership from our cast of facilitators and designers that we work with. So I'll give you a moment to jot that down, perhaps take a screenshot. And then, as I said, we will move into any questions and answers that you might have from this conversation.